the process of, which is that process of forming a question, gathering, cleaning, standardizing, aggregating, and then analyzing or visualizing a data, like visualizing that data, and then communicating it, which is the most important step. I cannot stress that enough. So those of you that like communicating and like talking to people, this is the background work that you do at your desk, and then talking to people is the fun that you get to have. I smile because that's honestly the part that I enjoy the most. And so the technical skills keep me in business, but talking to people is the part that I enjoy. But that's kind of the broad strokes of what that looks like. And then the more particular pieces of it, the multiple flavors of what it actually looks like. That's the piece that I want to take you through, because that's kind of where the nitty gritty is, which may be something that's more or less interesting to folks. But the three kind of paths are being an engine, like a data engineer, a data analyst, or a data scientist. For the purposes of this presentation, I will say that they are pretty distinct. However, live time, thinking about the industry as a whole, their roles do mix and blend. Now, what are their roles in particular? To say that they blend without talking about what they actually are is an oversimplification, and it's also me telling you what it looks like as opposed to telling you and offering and letting you make that decision for yourself. But data analysts ultimately gather up information, they structure that accordingly, and they help the business answer those questions, answer their questions. And so they're, one, particularly client facing. Two, they have there's like a baseline level of technical skills and programming. Systems like Excel, those are still very technical systems. People in the industry like to talk about it like you need all these other things, but like I did most of my job, the first parts of my job using proprietary systems and Excel. That was it. Systems that the company made, industry systems, and then Excel. That was where it was. And honestly enough, my mentor told me that was the first thing that I was going to need to learn. And so that was kind of how he tested me before he like took me to meet all of his people. But that's what a data analyst does. They pull together information and they analyze it using questions that they get or structure from the rest of the business. Data scientists are very close to that in that they do a very similar job, but they use models, algorithms, machine learning in particular, and they do forecasts to be able to predict things forward. Sometimes data analysts look for trends in past data, but data scientists use models and algorithms and machine learning and all the fun, fancy stuff, the buzzwords and things to try to look even a couple of minutes ahead, a couple of seconds ahead if you're talking about like stocks and portfolios and the like, for like high frequency trading and those types of things. But models, algorithms, machine learning are kind of the worlds of data scientists. They do what data analysts do, along with what data scientists, those key pieces. And then there's data engineers. Those data engineers are, I like to think of them as architects. They are the ones that are going to write what we call pipelines. They program out those pipelines to be able to pull that information in from wherever it exists out in the world, to be able to pull that to internal systems, maybe a warehouse, so that the analyst and the scientist can actually do what they need to do. And so they kind of create a team in which some people can look backwards, some people can look forwards, and there's someone feeding the data into all of it. Now, those skills are pretty transferable. As an analyst, I've written pipelines myself to be able to connect to data that's out in government facilities and government warehouses. Data scientists oftentimes need to figure out what the data engineers did to be able to say, well, this is the data that's being excluded. Actually, I want that in my model. And then sometimes they're getting too much, and that's hindering the performance of their model. And so they need to actually rewrite the pipeline to exclude it. Or maybe they need to cut that out when they get it, and it's not really something that the engineers need to retouch. But those are kind of the pieces. And so those are the flavors of it all, where they look forward looking, backward looking, and kind of how they fit into the whole process. So yeah. Then there's next. So this is kind of a roadmap. There's a lot of fancy tools here that honestly I didn't know about 4 years ago. Excel is my favorite, and it's not up here, but Google Sheets is its equivalent. And so I will say that of what is up here, I do not want to overwhelm anybody. I showed this to my wife, and she told me that I was going to overwhelm someone. And so I want to tell you off the hip, if you want to be a data analyst, an entry-level data analyst, you need to know 3 tools. I'll walk you through some of the other ones, but you only need to know 3. And then everything else you'll learn as things develop. But if you don't have your bread and butter locked in and loaded, everything else is just like fanciful, ornamental, and like, it's like, okay, cool. But you need Excel, Python, SQL. Python is wish I had the button for it. Where is it? Python is the one in the tools to get started, and the top right-hand corner, the blue and yellow symbol. That's Python. And SQL is the one with the elephant on it. That's PostgreSQL in particular, but SQL nonetheless. That's the top row under tools to get started, with the blue elephant on the top. But those 3 tools, Excel, Python, SQL. If you know those 3, then you can do most things, because what you're ultimately looking to do is answer questions, do so quickly, do so accurately, and then do so pretty thoroughly. Those are the key things. But with that said, there are a lot of other things that are out there in the world, and to give you a sense of all that's out there, or give you a sense of the different paths that you can take, or the different things that you might be really interested in and be able to hone into to be able to find your inroad. It might be different than mine. Mine was on the job and then wanting to get into strategy. Rather than like being told what to do, I wanted to help like form what we needed to do. But that's my inroad. Your story could be different. The story here, though, is I'm gonna work from top left to bottom right. Yep, that's the way. Top left to bottom right. So top left, the orange symbol is Google Colab. Google Colab is very similar to Python. However, it is online, and so you do not need to do any installations. People think that you have to do all this fancy integrations and like hyper boost your computer to be a data scientist, a data analyst, or an engineer. But Google Colab has everything that you need right there in the environment, and all you'll need to do is code straight into it. The second you type print, open parentheses, hello world, you're coding and you're off to the races. That's the first thing most people do in a language. And so you do that, you're a coder, like right there, right then and there. And everything else is more complicated versions of that, but still, you're coding. Google Sheets, still in the world of Google. That's a Google version of Excel. Excel, in most scenarios, outside of an academic or professional setting, costs you a bit of money every month, somewhere between $60 and $60. I didn't know that until after I started trying to use it in my undergrad experience, because I kept having it paid for as an econ major. And so I was like, oh, like I want to make a pivot. I like want to make a sheet. And it turned out that I had to pay, and I wasn't going to do that. And so step in Google Sheets. You can have a lot of live data right there. Make a quick table of, this is the month, this is how much I think my top line budget should look like. And you could be making a personal budget in there to be able to like do that, and then say, okay, what will the next month be like? If I average all of this, this is what my average looks like. And then you can be doing a bunch of statistics from there. But Google Sheets is very similar to Excel. It's really just the equivalent. It's free and it's all online. SQL, the blue elephant in the middle, top one. I will say that is SQL, and that one is pretty important. It's a free version. You can install it. There will be a little bit more of a learning curve for that one. But if you can use it, if you stick to it and you learn and you practice, it's actually one of the most versatile skills that you'll use. That one will actually get you into data engineering, data science, and data analytics. It's a baseline skill that, again, is bread and butter. We've talked about Python off to the right, and then there's GitHub in the middle, that black cat looking thing on the top. That is going to be where a lot of professionals ultimately keep all of their information. That's a free version control tool. So if you code anything in Google Colab and you download it, you can upload it straight to GitHub, and that's where you can keep all of your code, write comments, be able to talk other people in the industry through what you're doing as you're starting to develop your skills. Even if it's bad, it's still a good place to say, okay, well, like, this is the progression of my code over time, because that progression is something that employers are going to be particularly interested in. They're not interested in, like, if you're you could be the most fancy person out there in the world, but they're still going to want to know how you got there and, like, how you think about problems. And so putting things up on GitHub where it's like free storage, free data architecture, free version control, it's going to be really useful. And then I will move to that middle row. That's VS Code. This middle row is a little bit more of a mix, but VS Code is honestly one of the most versatile tools that's out there in the industry. I love it, and I use it on the daily now professionally. And I will say that it's one of the most versatile because it has just about every programming language available in it. There are some that are particular in that they only allow their programming language to be on that tool, or they're newer than VS Code, and VS Code doesn't necessarily facilitate the same things. But VS Code has Python, SQL, if you're familiar with it, Java, JavaScript, and a good number of other things on it. You can do front end things as well if you're familiar with, like, software engineering for, like, the computer science majors. If you want to make a website, you can do it from VS Code, and then they have plugins similar to Excel where you can, like, do all of it, like, right next to where you're coding, so you can see a mistake pop up the second you code it in. R, you might be familiar with, it's a statistics package. So all the mathematicians and all the folks in the PhDs, all the folks in the econ majors, you'll be able to run your statistics out of there. Now I'm gonna spot around a little bit here. TensorFlow, that's machine learning. For the folks that are interested in what they understand to be data science, TensorFlow is one of the key languages. It's maintained by Google. And you can do a number of different things in there. They have language processors to be able to, like, put values on language and then run scores through that. There's one really interesting study that I think machine learning was used for, where they took a bunch of movie scripts and ultimately tested the movie for like sexism. They wanted to see if there were two women in a movie, if they were primary characters, and if they spoke to each other about something other than a man. And so they ran it through, and there were very few movies that passed this test. But the fact that TensorFlow can do all of that with only one of the components is really cool. And that's like an entertainment use, like a social science entertainment kind of use, but still really interesting. And I tell that story because machine learning isn't where I live, because I'm more of a data analyst and that's data science, but it does show you what you can get into and what you can do. There are other people that have used TensorFlow and machine learning, that kind of world of things, to be able to try to help folks with, like, heart issues, to be able to see if there's things that you can, like, test for to predict people's likelihood and the severity of heart issues in the future, or different diseases in the future. And so, like, machine learning has those implications for those that are interested in, like, biology or like a medical practice or biostatistics more formally. And then I'll go to Apache Airflow. That's going to be for my engineers, for the folks that, like, want to figure out how to pull 30 different data sources into the house and then cut it the right way, you're the chef. You're the primary chef. You're the architect. You're the one that says, there are 30 ingredients out there. I know how to get them in house. I know how to like wash, clean, dice everything, and I will serve it up to you so that you can make whatever dish you want. You need tomatoes, you can make tomatoes in an omelet. You can make tomatoes in pasta. You can make tomatoes in salsa. But if you want tomatoes, they're the ones that will get you those tomatoes. So they're good. That's and you can write a lot of that in Apache Airflow. Now there are easier ways to do that. Python has some simple ways to do that. And there's like a lot of transfer in between them because Apache is actually something you can do in Python. However, you can also use it in like JavaScript and in other languages as well. So there's layovers and there's things that you can do on multiple systems, but the fundamental piece of all the jobs is how do you answer those questions? Now, as far as this slide goes, I promised you that I would give you some runway and give you some ideas. And at this point, I've only given you a car and there's no gas in the tank. So I'm gonna move on from my geeking out here on like really fun and cool tools and talk to you a little bit about some of the things that'll give you ideas. So we can focus on the left-hand side on Kaggle and Medium. Kaggle is a place where people put their live projects. And so you can see what other folks have done. Some of the things that I really enjoyed reading about is folks looking up happiness index as an alternative to GDPs and stock markets. If you pay any attention, if you're paying attention to the news, a lot of times politicians will quote GDP numbers or local numbers to be able to say that we're doing well or we're not doing well. Well, it's not the only way that you can look at those types of numbers. And so people have done like projects on happiness index, wellness index, health indices, and kind of built those out and taken data from different places, either formal or informal, self-reported or government office reported, nonprofit reported even, and talked about what that data is going to look like. How many rows, how many columns, is it anonymized? Is there personal information in it? And people have really walked through some of those things. And you can see what those kinds of projects look like and decide for yourself which ones are more interesting than not. And all of it's organized by like subject and recency and when did they do it. And so you can kind of find 40 projects in the same field and then decide, I like this field, but I only really care about these 3 types of projects. And then you can dig. And you can really dig into that and you can figure out what you want to do and how you want to build on that. The same way that you have research skills now to figure out like this is what the literature looks like, you can do the same thing in data. Now the different fields are going to allot you like different amounts of documentation and like history and testing and background, but there's an inroad and that's what I promised you and I didn't promise you much else. So, that's what I'll give you. And so you can get a lot of ideas from Kaggle. Medium is different from Kaggle in that it's not exactly for ideas, but there are a lot of data folks and folks in the data community talking about different tools. So all of these tools are talked about in detail. They are everything from installation to projects that you can do to basic, intermediate, advanced level skills and competencies. And you can also figure out like what those tools are for, who uses those tools, and how have they used those tools, and they've written about them and published it. Moreover, if you do something, and this is me moving into the marketing your skills section, if you were yourself to go through your entry level, like 30 days of figuring out programming, like what can I do in one day in like 2 hours of sitting with this tool from installation to coding? Okay, cool. Let's assume that you have your idea laid out. You could write about that, and if you can get enough people to sign up, you yourself can get paid. But more importantly, you documenting that experience, similar to GitHub, you documenting that experience is going to allow people to see what your process looks like as you develop those skills. So even if you just want to decide, if you want to establish, I'm competent in data literacy, I understand numbers, I'm a numbers person. Even if you're not a numbers person, if you want to be known as someone that comprehend the numbers and can be trusted to run your budget, run the numbers, test the numbers, and see what it looks like, build into, out of, forward looking, all of those things. You can do that by writing on Medium, and if you're one for the typing and you don't really want to talk to anybody, you can do that there. It's a great place for it. Similarly to Medium, LinkedIn is a great place. And actually, I'm going to go in an opposite direction. If you are one for talking, if you are one for talking and you're not really one for writing, you can go the podcast route or the YouTube route. There are a number of people, data folks, actually. When I said data originally, like when I first came into the industry, I thought everybody was like behind closed doors, but the first few people I met were like really extroverted folks that like would run around, give folks the mandate, give folks the business, like this works, that doesn't work, I can do this, I can't do that. And like there are a lot of people that move in all different types of ways, that are running podcasts, that run YouTube channels. Example, Alex the Analyst. Alex the Analyst, the data science show with Daliana Liu, and How to Get an Analytics Job. How to Get an Analytics Job was written by a gentleman. How to Get an Analytics Job is a YouTube show and a podcast. He runs a college course and also like an apprenticeship program out of Greensboro, North Carolina, helping folks get their first analytics jobs. He talks to everybody from CDOs, chief data officers, CFOs, to figure out like what data looks like in a different part of the house, and like people just getting their first job and like that work with him and from his course and his apprenticeship. Daliana Liu is an Amazon engineer, data scientist, data engineer, and she does. She's one of the few Asian women in the whole industry that like runs a podcast and talks about like what her work looks like, what working at a Fortune 500, like a premier company in the United States looks like, and invites other people on to be able to do something similar. And then there's like sometimes they like syndicate these things. So there's YouTube versions, there's podcast versions, and they also maintain their own LinkedIns. And that'll be my inroad into like LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great place for you to be able to cultivate your network of people, no matter what industry you are in, like college graduate to person in college, you should have a LinkedIn. Great place to put all of your professional development, even if you change industries. Recruiters will look for people on there. You can have you can follow up on conversations with the pretext of this is for business. You can also run a business straight out of LinkedIn as well. And so that's also a place where you can talk about your development. If you make a PowerPoint and then you don't want to write about it on Medium, you don't want to create a podcast, you don't want to do all that extra stuff or pay for anything else, LinkedIn is a free service where you can kind of house all of those things. But herein is a roadmap of tools to use, where to get ideas, and then how to market them, from most conventional to least conventional to most conventional. LinkedIn being the most conventional, and the other ones being like for those folks that it really catches a fire for. If you want to step into that, cool. But yeah, I could go on and on about all of these things. So I'm going to move on before I end up in that very deep rabbit hole. And so this is where I'm going to get into the industries, because I think that this is kind of where it's a conversation about like how you find your way to the industry, because those things are different for different people. There are folks that will find themselves thinking like, maybe data isn't for me. Like there's technical skills, I don't really want to use these. I don't want to be the coding person in like the back office, which I can understand. There's nothing wrong with that, but I can also understand that. And then there are some people that are like, I want to particularly be in the back, and I want to maintain the systems. I want to make sure that things run, and I want to be clear about what's done and what's not done, and I want to see it in lines of code and be like, I wrote 500 lines of code today. Like that's great. I'm like, more power to you. However, you can do all of those things in different industries. And so this is me just talking about how you can do the work in different industries. So when it comes to medicine and biostats, I talked before about how you could use machine learning to be able to do that, to be able to like forecast out what early symptoms there may be to be able to kind of figure out like the severity of an issue or furthering conditions down the line. There are also places that like need somebody to run a budget. Hospitals need someone to manage the budget, and that financial information is data. Like how much is being spent on like needles, how much is being spent on like gauze, and you manage that budget. You figure out what you're expecting to spend versus what you're forecasted to spend, and you can do that in like a medical practice. In finance, I gave you my own experience of trying to figure out like how I could grow in the size of my book of work, and there were other things I needed to do, but knowing how to do this and is part of it. There's also the fact that like people are going to need plenty of reports, and so building reports using that flow of information that may already be there, but sticking your hand into it and being like, I'm going to use this for this. Like I need a doorstop. Like I'm going to call a report a doorstop, but like, cool, I need a doorstop. And so you start shaving away at the wood until you got a little doorstop. Now, one of the reports I needed to put together was, I pulled it from an internal system that had all of what we understood to be, let's call them traders, what their positions were. And then I had the industry system of all of the trades that they wanted to book for a given day. I needed to blend the two so that I could say, okay, like this is the flow of trades in the business, what I expect. And then I needed to do the math myself. And at one point in time, somebody else had built it such that the system would do the math and we just had to double check it. Systems changed, and that system transformation in and of itself is a project manager job, which to some degree can be a data job as well. So that's a thing. But nonprofits, I'll move on. Nonprofits. I interviewed for a nonprofit that ultimately does consulting work for other nonprofits and helps them figure out where their like issues were in the process. Were they advertising to the right place? What was the cost of getting things to actually happen that they wanted to happen? What you measure is what you aim towards. And sometimes people will say, we spent this amount of money, but their goal wasn't to spend more money. Of course, nobody wants to spend more money. Their goal was to get people to like subscribe or show up to an event, or like a click-through rate. Like, can I get you to click on this button and then click the button that says like, I'm gonna spend this money. And so you need to measure like click-through rate based on an ad and like where you position that ad. If you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of it, like that, they like do the same thing at Facebook for like the size of the button. And like, can they get you to like click, is it more clickable this way or that way? This color, that color. And that's called A/B testing. That's another thing. I talked to you about entertainment before with like the machine learning in the movies. But like there's also just very generally like, you could use two numbers: the name of the movie, how much they spent, how much it earned. If you want to get any deeper, top 3 highest paid actors, and then what was the number? And that in and of itself is a really important report. And you could go by subject, and then you can say, okay, I'm a movie maker. What movies are going to make money? And it's not like somebody would change what's like the story in their heart, but they might say, okay, well, like this is what the budget might look like for a movie that I want to make. And this is how much I might think that it might make if I made it. I'm not telling you to change. I'm just telling you that there's some numbers out there that you may want to look at that will help you inform what you do and how you make your business plan and when you tell your story to the next person. Because your story isn't the only thing that's important. The numbers will tell a story that is equally important to the people that will fund your movie. So there's that other piece. Politics. I also interviewed for the DNC. I had a really great time doing it. I learned a bunch. My sequel, I have since refined my sequel. And so they need folks too. They needed a fundraising analyst. And they, at the time, had someone that was more of a data engineer and what we call in the business a business analyst, but that was acting as the manager, that not acting, but that is the manager. Her job is to get those business questions that I talked about and help the team understand those things to build things around the business's issues. And if the team's issue is fundraising, our job is to measure, track, pull in the data, clean it, analyze, and get answers about how do we drive, how have we done, and how do we drive fundraising for the DNC. It's a really interesting job and one that's pretty cool. But right next to the DNC is the ACLU, and I'm going to put that underneath social justice and the law. The ACLU has a data team. Mind you, that data team was set up in the last, 3, 4, 5 years? Yeah, 3, 4, 5 years. I actually reached out to somebody on that team and asked them about it. And they were like, yeah, we're pretty new. Like, we do X, Y, Z. We answer questions across the business. They want to know like what legal cases have touched on this. And like we have a bunch of analogs, but somebody needs to like look through it. So we are the ones that query the systems. And so we have to maintain the tags and update the tags and this, that, and the third thing. But we're also like pulling information from government databases to analyze their numbers around different subjects when people make a claim about such and such being XYZ kind of way. And they do those things. Now, all of those things are particularly serious and like, I'm a big fan of them. But if you want to do something a bit more on the, like if you love baseball or you love soccer, like most of the world loves soccer. I don't love soccer, but that's not the point. If you love soccer, you could be a sports data analyst and work for CNN and do things like figuring out if one button click or the other gets somebody to like watch more videos or which ads should go next to which clips. Or you could work for a team and figure out like what their strategy should actually look like. Interestingly enough, and now talking about it in a presentation, I'm actually really proud of it for the data industry. Not my thing, but I'm very proud of it for the data industry point blank. But the reason that there are so many three-pointers shot now is because data analysts figured out that it was better to shoot behind the free throw line, the 3-point line, and miss more of those than to actually try to drive and like make more of those shots, like taking it all the way through. And because of that, the whole game changed and teams started getting blown out. It was ridiculous. It was a knockout show and everything changed until everybody else picked it up too. And then they started doing it. And then you can look this up. The 3-point line has actually been moved back. And they actually moved it forward because they moved it too far back and they found that like it wasn't as much fun. So they moved it forward because people actually like 3-point shots. But like all that, where people are shooting from, like data analysts are informing that. It just is what it is. I think Deliana Liu did a pretty good show on that exact phenomenon with sports analysts. And that sports analyst runs a YouTube channel, funny enough. So there's cross-pollination. People are familiar with other folks' work. And so that was something that they did. And then sales is all numbers. I'll move on, but like sales is all numbers. And so you can run similar data. You can run numbers around like expected spend, expected costs, forecast that out. And then what are the actuals? And that's a pretty important graph right there. You get the numbers right for folks and you can actually then start to figure out like what people's bonuses should look like, because certain types of businesses have like compensation strategies that honestly are made around sales. Like I think car salesmen may have that. If I can sell 50 Ferraris, cool, I can sell 50 Ferraris. But like, I need to know that. I need to know like who the person in my office is that is like most likely to sell like somewhere between 50 and 55. And is that going to make or break my budget? If like they only sell 50 and everybody else sells what I expect them to sell, I need to know that. Like they might not be doing anything wrong. They sold 50, but like, will that make or break my budget? And then I need to run that flag over and communicate that to my stakeholders accordingly. And so all of these businesses, all of these industries need a data person. And these really big companies out there, Facebook, Amazon, Google, Netflix, Alphabet, all of them, they have data folks and they run it at those are some premier spots. Getting a job there in anything is really advanced. Like, it's a thing. It's a thing to be proud of. All of which you all are capable of. and something to be proud of. And it's pretty hard. However, there are also entry-level spots. If you are concerned about this, there are also entry-level spots at small and medium-sized companies, mom and pop shops even, where you can take your value and your level of skill and be able to find your inroad in those places. I went to work at Goldman Sachs in their operations division and found folks working in data in that space. And that was where I found my inroad. It wasn't I didn't go there to be a data person. And honestly, the first thing that got me interested in it in the first place was a number of data, like a data course that they had at Goldman. They were trying to teach people a particular system. And so they brought in a consultant to be able to teach this tool called Alteryx. I didn't talk about it today, but like big dashboard, it helps you figure out your inputs, maps all the calculations, and then spits out reports for you on the other end. And that's real simplified, but like they had somebody in that was like a master at it, 10 years of experience in the tool. And I wanted to go figure it out, but I was helping the team do something else. And so I couldn't go, and got really interested and found out that like Alteryx was, you had to pay for it, but you didn't have to pay for SQL. So I started with SQL rather than Alteryx. And so that started me out being like, oh, this is actually more mainstream than the other thing. Like I might be able to do the Alteryx stuff with my SQL stuff. So like I could not do that, mind you, for about a year, but still it was worth knowing. And so all that to say, your inroad can be in any number of ways. You can use it to help what you want to do, or you can make it a full-time job. I didn't even talk about the consultants that do data visualization and like brand strategy for their full-time job. Some of them, there's one guy that runs a podcast. His name is Jonathan Schwabish. He runs a podcast called the Policy Vid podcast. He works for, I want to say like, I think he works for like the Urban Institute. That's the one. He works for the Urban Institute part-time as an economist, but he also runs his own like data visualization consultancy part-time, and then runs the podcast and runs the Patreon on top of the podcast to be able to pay for his work for the show, where he like edits stuff and buys equipment and like brings in speakers, and like it's all the labor of love. Like they do all that. There's another one called like the Data Viz podcast with Torben. I think it's Ali Torben. She's one of my favorites. They run like a group called Elevate Data Viz together, and I think they're also on the board of like the Data Visualization Society. But like they work with any number of industries in their day-to-day jobs. And so for those people that like to think of themselves as like someone that will one day start a business, manage a business of one, any of those different flavors of things, that could be you. You could be a data visualization consultant and work in all of these industries and generate your own clients and be your own CEO. That's a way to do things. I know there are people out there that do that now. And I'm going to move on because we have 8 minutes to talk about the money. And I promised you I would talk to you about the money. Data analysts, it's odd. Data scientists and data engineers are in this mix. However, sometimes they flip. Admittedly. And all of these are for entry-level roles with these job titles. I wish I had the time to pull this in about like the number of remote jobs, mind you, that are on LinkedIn that have been posted in even the last week for all of these job titles. But a quick search and a quick filter on LinkedIn will show you that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs for entry-level data analysts, data scientists, and data engineers working remote jobs throughout the country. There are also a number of programs to be able to teach you how to do these skills that are listed out here and the free resources that I listed out before. Example, Amazon has an entry-level data science and data analytics course for free on their website that you can take that's somewhere between 2 and 5 hours. And those are major companies that run these things for free, and we'll talk to you about all the other things. Google has a data analytics certification that they also manage as well. and they list out some of the same numbers about like entry-level jobs in some of these fields to be able to like talk about comp. And so when it comes down to data analysts, some of the entry-level jobs are around like, for folks listening in and not looking, that's somewhere around like 69.5K a year. For data scientists, and mind you, data scientists and data engineers flip a little bit. Some of their, like the average is about 121.2. And for data engineers, about 112,000 or 111.9 thousand. And that's, to be honest with you, I've worked at a tech startup. Those numbers are for real. And data analysts are on the low end of this. And I worked at a tech startup, and 6 figures is very possible, like entry level, with Excel, SQL, Python. Excel, SQL, Python will get you, at a tech startup, mind you, there's like cultural implications and like pacing and other considerations to be made. So make those. But working in industry considerations, that's a big one as well. Thinking about comp. Those are all pieces to this. Now, the reason that I tell you these numbers to kind of give you an idea of like what's possible. However, there are a number of factors that are going to play a role in like what a data professional makes. And I think that calculation is more important to talk about than what the number is that you should expect, because there's things like inflation that are going on right now that are really big in the news that you should also take into consideration. But top level things, job title. You want to check sites like Glassdoor and LinkedIn to be able to check for what the industry, like what people are self-reporting the number is that they're making for a job title. They're great crowdsource places like that. So you want to look for the job title. You want to look for the tools used. A tool like Airflow, where data engineers need to use that. Like you really need to start asking if they just expect you to be a data analyst, if they're asking you to use data engineering tools. SQL may be something that they expect you to use as a data analyst, but like if they asking you for specific data engineering tools, then like they need to start talking data engineering money. And so that's the thing to consider. You want to talk about like what your responsibilities are going to be, and is it client facing? Is it behind closed? Is it like behind the customer facing side of the business? Where I was in operations, not all of everybody in operations is dealing with clients. My job did, but I could be a data person working in operations, and the rest of the business would need to handle client interactions. So you need to figure out, does it handle client interactions? Then it's like location. Is it remote? Is it in person? Do you have to pay for gas to get to do your commute? Or can you do it from the comfort of your own home? You should be thinking about the whole benefits package. Like, are they paying for your equipment? Are they paying for your desk? Are they paying for like a new computer? Do they expect you to have any of your own computer, like equipment? Personally, as a professional, like I have a podcast studio arm off to my left, and like a separate monitor that I use so that I can have 2 monitors at any given one time. And at one point I had 3, where I had 2 up top and 1, the laptop that they sent me. And sometimes I still felt like it was a little crowded on my desktop to be able to do it, but still, like I say all that to say, those are some of the considerations that you should be thinking about when you're talking about like comp in the industry. And then the last one I'll bring up is industry. If you're talking about a for-profit, then that's sometimes different than a nonprofit. However, you should be doing your research when you're looking up an employer to see like how much money did they pull in, and like, are there any statistics or numbers on what that job title looks like for that kind of issue or in that kind of industry, to be able to see what that is. If you're working at a tech startup and you have these types of technical skills, I will push you to ask for 90. Like, or unless you're in the Midwest, in which case like 85. But still, like, it is what it is. But I will leave it at that. Those are some of the things that you should look at. And then this is a bit of a summary slide. This is a bit of a summary slide where you can kind of think about like who uses what tools, Python, Excel, SQL. You'll see that some of those are transferable. You'll notice that engineering has some of the particular tools that we didn't talk about or talk through. I mentioned Java like slightly, but like Java is one. Hadoop, Spark, those are data storage and data architecture tools. But still, you'll want to like think about those. And then some of the responsibilities, like the responsibilities laid out, and then is this kind of job like business facing? If you're dealing with clients, like you are representing the company to clients, that should get you paid. You should be paid commensurate to that experience. And so that's going to be a piece of it as well. But like this slide just has data analysts, data scientists, data engineers, and breaks out some of the pieces that I think you should think about if you're interested in the profession, such as responsibilities, tools, skills, is it business facing, and then the commensurate salary. And this is from Math for Magicians. And so there's an appendix here as well, excuse me, that you can also see. But I think I am at time, and this is where I would ask for questions. There's an appendix with all of the sources. So if anybody's out there watching and trying to figure out like, where did he get all this stuff? Here are the sources. Some of them are from Medium. Some of them are placed from Coursera, where you can also find some of the resources that I mentioned before. But yeah, this is all of it. This is all of it. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I'm right at time.
Well, I do have questions. I think we're good. Okay, so you mentioned something very important. You had a mentor. Are we saying that you had a mentor while you were in school? Or was it when you left for Dallas for your first job?
I had a mentor. I'm glad you asked that, because mentorship's a huge thing professionally, point blank period. I had a mentor in college, actually. They had graduated from my high school, and my high school, St. Benedict's Prep, they have a model where, like, I think it's I am my brother's keeper is like one of the key phrases. And so there were people from all over coming in for like a career day, helping folks that were in college. And so you would go to different rooms, and I was interested in econ as a minor at the time. And so I went to them to talk to them about like global financial services. And so I went to talk to him, and it turned out that other folks had talked to him previously, and they said, well, like, you can come across the bridge from New Jersey to New York and like have an informational interview. Funny enough, the recruiter that I spoke to was Trierlyn Bryant. I will never forget that name. A Black woman out of the Navy, like a Navy captain. She looked at my resume when I got there and was like, so why do you want to be here? And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I'm interested in talking to you all. And she was like, you have econ as a minor, you don't know anything about us, your resume does not reflect that you know anything about us or like that you're really interested in this direction. I give you a 0.5, and we do score resumes here. And that was the day I decided to double major in econ, Africana studies. I met a lot of other good folks there too, but she gave it to me straight. And like between her, my mentor, Brian Kennedy, Levy Brooks, Kalima Maya Perez, they honestly like helped me get set up. And they told me like all the places where I should, like all the people that I should look out for. And like they told me where I needed to look. And so that was kind of like my inroad. They then helped me get set up with an internship at Goldman Sachs, and an interested students week, like 3 days. They flew everybody out and they helped me get set up. They checked out my resume. They helped me make fixes. I met like-minded people, and then moved on into like the full summer internship. I turned down the first one because it was in human capital management. I wasn't necessarily interested at the time, and I ended up doing economic research on campus. But still, like that technical stuff was like really useful. But yeah, that mentor, I got them while I was in undergrad. But I'd say cold email people on LinkedIn, like it's a professional place. Tell them why you're interested in their work and like what you're doing in that vein of work. And like, if you have a question or two, like shoot them that question or two. If they respond like, hey, like I was hoping to ask you a question, but otherwise I just admire your work. You send out 15 of those, like you might get 2 responses. You send out 30, the number starts to go up, in which case like these do need to be a little tailored. And so cool. But if you're looking for a mentor, like a loose mentor, like somebody that you meet up with once a quarter, once every 2 quarters.
Mhm.
That can be pretty useful still to be able to answer
Right.
like professional questions. But yes, that's how I found the mentor, and that's when I found them.
And Cleo said, you see that? She said 0.5 out of what? When they were basically.
To be honest, I don't know. I was so scared, but I knew it was the lowest score I had ever gotten in college.
I mean, since we were talking about numbers, I figured I should get some context about what it was out of.
Yep.
Yeah, this was amazing. I learned so much.
Me too.
I might have to contact you afterward and get your thoughts on directions that someone who is getting a social science degree can go in, like particularly when you mentioned the social justice piece, because I want to be able to pull all of that in. And so you made it very like digestible, and you gave a lot of really good information. So thank you for that.
Absolutely, and I'm really glad to hear that. Number one, and number two, speaking of like inroads into like data science, one of the questions I kind of had like in the last 2 months was I coded a pipeline to grab some education data, and my manager was like, "How long did it take you to do that?" And I was like, 2 hours, and he was like, "This is great. Like, how long did it take you to write this?" And I was like, 2 hours. And he was like, "Oh my god, like this I couldn't copy paste it. I couldn't click anywhere. Like, how long did it take you to write this?" I was like, it took me 2 hours. But between Google Colab, that kind of made me ask the question of like, how do I make this easy for folks to get into? And I made a blank sheet of paper. I use Visual Studio Code and one library that pulls in most of the data science libraries that you could possibly want. Everything from machine learning, a lot of machine learning, a lot of data analytics, and like you should be able to start coding from there. There's a blank spot for like your header and some of the questions you might have, but like it's once you know all of it, like once you read through it all, it's like, okay, cool, like I can get started and just run this one file and you've got roadway. And that's I'm glad that this presentation gave you roadway, but like that question is in particular, I'm like, I don't want to work harder, I want to work smarter. And if working smarter will make it easy, then let's do this.
Exactly.
Isaac, give me a typical for an analyst work week. Are we talking 70 hours? Because that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking at the computer, 5 monitors in front of you, numbers. I'm thinking on average, maybe 60, 70 hours. Am I just over exaggerating? Am I almost accurate? And it depends on, does it depend on the industry?
That's a big question. And I'm glad that's where I will start, because it works its way back from there. Industry is a huge component of it. I did quote you like a 6-figure number out of tech, and like with like once you cross that intermediate level threshold for Python, Excel, SQL, like that in communication and like stakeholder management, you will run up the hours. 60 to 70 is reasonable. Like high 50 at the minimum is like real. They're paying you commensurate with like them driving ahead of a goal, and like them being a company that they're a startup, they may not even be profitable just yet, or not consistently profitable. So like pushing that 60-hour work week, like that's a real thing. Now in other industries, I've worked in like, they don't care, like you're salaried, but like they don't care how long you work, you get it done. So if you can get it done in 45, great, you get it done in 45. If you get it done in 70, they're gonna ask you some questions about efficiency, but like 60 is okay. 60 might be okay. But like still, so no, you don't necessarily need to burn yourself out entirely. And honestly, in the last few years, that's part of what I've been looking for working from home. I wanted a team that like has a reasonable standard in terms of how much work they want you to do and how long they are going to give you to do it. Are they going to help you grow? Will they let you learn new languages on the job and get paid for it? And like, will other people give you roadway for growth? And I will say that a colleague of my manager is going for his master's right now while he's being like a strategic lead. So they didn't diminish his like responsibilities at all. and they gave him roadway to like go get a master's. They gave me, another teammate, and that manager roadway to learn like a really cool tool named Snowflake, and that has some SQL components in it and data engineering components in it. And it was a free course that that they put on. But like, I want you to know that there are a bunch of other people looking for those things too. So like, you have the right to look for a reasonable job that will also give you the time and bandwidth to like learn, either on your personal time or on their dime. So yeah, no, I'm not doing burnout. I have, but I'm not doing it anymore. I refuse.
Okay. With age comes wisdom. And so working smarter, not harder, as you mentioned. Now, for your level of expertise or your familiarity with the tools, can that, I mean, I would think that would simplify what you do, right? If I know 10
yes.
programs, but I prefer these 4 over here, they make my life a little easier. They're pulling exactly what we want to see. Okay.
Yes, that's the key. Like I mentioned, like there are fundamental skills and there are ornamental skills. I'd say fundamental to any of these is Python, SQL, Excel. Now, if you get into Python, there are hundreds of libraries that will take you from data engineering and like pulling in, cleaning information and visualizing it, to analyzing it, to projections, to data, to machine learning. You can do all that in Python, but all those libraries are like subtools. Similar to JavaScript, like you can do data analytics in Python that you feed into Java, and then make a whole web page in like C++ and in Java and HTML, and you can like write your own like web page. There's actually a guy that did that for COVID, and like he was an MIT grad and like did some data analysis and forecasting stuff and machine learning stuff, and like now he's world renowned, and like the White House has quoted his web page, and like COVID prediction numbers. It's like wild. And like he was doing like sports analytics at the time, but when COVID hit the NBA, he was like, I got time now. So like, I would say decide what your bread and butter is going to be and why. I didn't go through one thing, and I wish I had, but it's really interesting, and it's data journalism. And data journalism is being able to use data to tell a story too. And there are folks that work in like politics coverage, and they can make a graph of the United States, and you can click on something or highlight something and like dig into it per county, and they can give you a bunch of information about like how much was donated in that area by what party, like the voter turnout versus like eligible voters and like registered voters, and they can do all that. But like they can do almost all of that stuff alone. They can do data stuff, and they can do like visualization stuff, set it up on the website, give it to somebody else, version control on GitHub, and like they can do that stuff. And they have, I'm naming like 5 or 6 tools, but like 5 or 6 tools can get you paid, and like get you paid doing really cool stuff internationally. And it just is what it is. So yeah, my bread and butter are Excel, Python, SQL. I'm branching into what is called analytics engineering, like cutting the data the right way for analytics, so that you have pre-established definitions for the data scientist and data analyst, and data science particularly for politics, political use. Those are my kind of like interests, but like my bread and butter are those 3 tools. Like I use Excel on a regular, Python and SQL on maybe.
Cool. I have a question about like advanced degrees and how they operate in this industry. Because it seems like it's mostly about what skills you have developed and whether or not you've developed them. Like it doesn't matter how you develop them. I'm sure there's probably some type of formal certification that people want to be able to see, but outside of that, is there like a some type of, I don't know how to say this, but like if you have an advanced degree, does that do something for you in this industry?
Mm, I'm glad you asked because I did. I'm glad you asked. And it's the right question. You're getting a PhD, so it makes sense. That like I'm honestly I'm looking at a master's myself, but like to answer your question, yes, it does do something for you, but can you get those same benefits from somewhere else? Yes, you can. Um, there are 1 year master's programs, there are 1 year PhD programs in data science. And they cover different subjects. There's sports analytics one at like, I think one in Virginia. There's like a political one at like Georgetown. There's like an applied mathematics and statistics one with machine learning at MIT. But like the trick is grad school and certifications at large can afford you like there's a very wide landscape for it. So like those things do exist, but like what those things afford you is experience. What I tried to do here today was like give you an idea of where to find ideas, how to find an inroad to what you're passionate about, and then framing your thinking around solving problems no matter what tools you use. And like in doing that and publishing about it and talking about it on different platforms, you can like do that stuff and you gain experience. That's what the same thing that a boot camp, which is the kind of the associate's level equivalent is, like it's a quick run through of what you're interested in. And you can like do that. Some of them are paid, some of them, there's one for folks without a college degree. There's ones for folks that like have a college degree, but they will wait until you start making money to collect any fees. And then there are like free courses, and there's like sites like Coursera and edX where you can get certified, or you can audit a class until you feel competent enough to like take a paid version and then say, okay, like I want to get this certification and I'm going to use that to market myself. And like those are great, but the trick is that they give you experience. They tell you how to market yourself. They support you in that process. But if you are one that can like, you can figure out your projects, you like look at other people for inspiration, you have a tenacity to like answer the question, and to answer it, or to document why you could not answer it, or the extent to which you could answer the problem or the question you set out to solve. That in and of itself is really helpful and will give you the experience and the platform to like do those things. I've personally been working on like a handful of articles in Medium, and I've been thinking about running a podcast on Podcastle. And I've got a friend that used to go to Harvey Mudd that like runs his own independent data consultancy. And so I was gonna like interview him first. We like talked over LinkedIn about it, and he's really excited to do that. But I just figured out how to run a podcast. So like you don't need to go to grad school and pay for anything, but what you need is experience, and experience will come with like doing it over and over again. And like doing it in different directions and learning how to talk about it and looking at other folks and like following people. I follow folks on Twitter, Instagram, Discord, where like professionals like get on the same server and talk about this stuff. Like it, and I didn't say this before, but it is a place where you are constantly learning. If you want to know something and you want everything to be defined and you want to like, if you want to constantly have to learn stuff, this is the great place for you. You can learn something new and be up to date immediately, because that might become the industry standard. But like, that doesn't mean that all the questions are going to be answered. You will have to learn stuff. But like, if you're okay with that, if you're okay with like constantly having a question or problem and like a back and forth and stakeholders, like this is a great place for you. And I love that process myself. So yeah, you don't need an advanced degree, but it could help. And it also may give you an inroad to like a specialized field like sports analytics. That's why they have a sports analytics master's program. And so that can be particularly helpful. So there's reasons to and not to do those. I personally went to the I went to the extension school for the University of California, Berkeley for data certification, so that I could tell the story that I was like practicing it on my own, starting the process, and then I took it to another level with that certification. And then from there, like I was looking to take it full time. So that's the way that I shaped my story to be able to get to that point.
Cleo, I'm
That's
glad you asked
awesome.
that question. I'm definitely a supporter of education, worked through my doctorate, but there are certain industries, I'd say law, medicine, higher ed, where it's necessary to have an advanced degree if you want to, progress. But there are others where, like Isaac was saying, experience and, more experience will suffice and kind of beef up that resume, right? Because people want to know that you've done this before, as opposed to you went back to school, but how long have you been doing what you're doing? You know what I mean? And so yeah, it's just certain industries where that is not, it's not necessary. It's not necessary to have that advanced degree, which of course most people do it for their own personal, to meet their own personal goals. But you don't have to owe a lot of money in the end.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any more questions, Cleo? We lose her?
No, I don't have any more questions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Isaac,
Thank you. No, this was awesome.
this was awesome.
I'm glad.
It was live on Facebook, and we also recorded it. I'm going to have a career network archive online where our students will be able to access all of this important, pertinent information, for years to come.
Perfect. Good. Thank y'all for having me on.
Glad you're back in the LA area, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah. LA proper.
LA is where it's at. What part of LA?
5 minutes from USC, actually. Why did I disappear? 5 minutes from USC.
Really? Okay, my alma mater. Yay! Try to get you a
Oh, so
game
you're
this
like
fall.
in the thick of things. That's good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Isaac, on behalf of OBSA. We
Absolutely.
appreciate you. We enjoy you, and please stick with the alumni mentorship program.
Will do.